Does it really have to be that way? Well then, as we move forward now, to bring a meaningful conclusion to these past 2 full days of deep reflection and of this retreat, let us now conclude, so to speak, the logical line of reasoning that we have been pursuing throughout this entire discussion.
We should stop there, the meaning.
It's precisely to understand that everything has a unity. That is to say, not too long ago in our previous discussions we saw how creation, redemption, and sanctification, even though for us they appear to be a multitude of distinct divine acts, many different aspects, and many various ways of understanding the entirety of the magnificent work that God has accomplished for us.
If it seems to us as if the work of creation, redemption, and sanctification were different actions and separate from each other, that is not actually the case.
In reality, if we contemplate the world from God's divine perspective, it is a single thing, a single plan of God, a single story, and a single life. This is the unique act of God, because in Him there is no succession of acts, because there is no time, but rather it is eternal.
For God, there is no sequence of time, no succession, there is no time for God, everything is now. That is why
it is a singular solitary act, an unending continuous act, an everlasting and eternal act. But we must carefully contemplate every single thing from this specific perspective, as something that originates from unity, and eventually guides us back again to that same unity. That is why we also speak of the unity of the person, our memory that gives unity to our whole being. And so, this ultimately means that we are all collectively called to work together to create a lasting sense of unity, as children of the divine will, as people who want to live in the divine will. Now, of course, well, it's worth noting that we have only just met each other over these past 2 days. However, we can certainly tell you that there are currently many diverse groups located all over the entire world, who faithfully follow the profound spirituality of the divine will in their daily lives. And even though we do not know them, we are still united in a spiritual unity, in a unity. Why? Because if we live in the will of God, there we find everyone. And this is precisely the reason why, as we continue to grow and mature more deeply within our spiritual life in the divine will, we should never allow ourselves to become hindered or fixated on the minor differences, or on the various complexities that we may find difficult to fully comprehend, or any of those things that sometimes seem to separate us from one another. Instead, we need to smooth those things out and always live in unity. In recent times, we have successfully led several other retreats in various locations across Italy, throughout Belgium, within Mexico, and all over the United States. But in all of them, you can deeply sense that powerful and overwhelming desire to be united, that profound sense of longing. And sometimes it's as if we had known each other for a long time. We were just saying this with Andrea a little while ago. We met yesterday, but it feels like we've known each other for years. Well, you see, I truly think that is exactly what the divine will can begin to achieve and manifest deeply within us. But anyway, we have all the writings of Luisa Picareta, especially her diary, which can help us on a deeply personal level to truly grow within the grace of God's divine will and to grow together. That's why it's necessary that we have that desire to meet one another, to be truly united, especially with the ultimate source that gives unity to everything, which is precisely the place where Luisa lived, which is Corato, so the mother association is in Corato. And so the sacred and essential path we must strive to follow diligently is to be completely and permanently grafted into the church. That is to say, always remaining forever deep within the heart of the church. We are not something separate, apart. We shouldn't consider ourselves as someone who is going into the church. We are already inside. And that's why, little by little, the dioceses will have to start organizing themselves. This is done so that each and every individual bishop can truly take it seriously. And, for example, go through the process to appoint a dedicated spiritual assistant, as well as a qualified ecclesiastical assistant for that specific diocese. This happens in other parts of the world where bishops have already appointed priests for their entire diocese to serve as points of reference. Worldwide, where the bishop truly unites a spiritual assistant for the movement. Robin now has one and he is doing it. And so, in this way, we can truly be all united, each one in their own diocese, but within the whole church. Throughout the entire reach of the universal community, encompassing every single congregation and member found within the whole church, across all nations and regions of the world today. So, at the beginning, I was asked how to make the changes. I think that is part of the development of each person, of each one. It's like that deep inner work that each individual does quietly in their heart and contemplates, meditates, reflects, thinks, prays. As each individual person gradually comes to understand and, well, continuously journeys and grows within their own personal mind.
Well, you see, what are frequently referred to as gyros, I am not entirely sure if that is actually also the case specifically in German, but that is the term used. It's just that in Spanish there are two words. There's the word gyros, but there's another, more appropriate word, which is recorrido. But anyway, just to understand the idea, it refers to this way of praying in the divine will, which Jesus gradually teaches to Luisa, of going through, for example, his passion. First, his passion. For example, going through his suffering, moving on to others, each hour of his passion. But not just going through it, but praying as well. Deeply loving Jesus, expressing our gratitude to him, and offering acts of reparation together with him. So, the hours of the Passion can be said to be a round or a journey through the Passion of Jesus. Later on, he teaches her to go through other moments of his life. For example, the Christmas novena, the 9 months that Jesus was in his mother's womb, with that same idea of accompanying him, of receiving the graces he enclosed there, and of giving him love and gratitude, reparation on behalf of all humanity. So, little by little, Luisa was gradually learning more things about the life of Jesus. On one occasion, he says to her, "Look at how I come to Nazareth to work just as I used to work." And he teaches her how to unite herself to the work of Jesus, and Luisa, with her mind, would go through the life in Nazareth, performing the same interior activity. Consequently, that would be circulating throughout the work of redemption, throughout the entire life of Jesus. Then there is the making rounds, or going through the work of creation. And in fact, its foundation lies in the chapters where he teaches her about this. There are many of them. So, for example, he says to her, "Look, in the Son I placed all my burning love for you and for all humanity. So come and give me your response on behalf of everyone." So Luisa turns this into a prayer, and it says, "In your divine will, in the Son, I want to love you. Thank you on behalf of everyone for everything you put in the Son for everyone." And so from each created thing, it goes through each created thing to give it a corresponding response to God. That would be making twists in creation. But the way to learn is precisely when one reads a chapter. What does that refer to? Yeah, that's right. It is receiving knowledge. And then carry out the action and recite the sacred prayer. But it is something personal. You can do it, or if you want, in a group, but it must also be done personally. And there you learn little by little. Then there's the sanctifier and the work of sanctification. To illustrate this point, there is a chapter found within volume 18 that focuses on the sacraments. So, how does he explain it? How does Jesus suffer there and Jim the Holy Spirit? All. And he asks for a response of love from Luisa and from us as well. And then, if we look right over here, we have the reparation of sacrament by sacrament. So, taking this opportunity, I want to tell you that precisely because all of this has come from the divine will and is in the divine will. The soul that enters to live in the divine will consider all of this as something of its own that God gives as gifts from God. We'll go through it, we'll give God a response, and we'll be the one who loves all of this the most. Because everything came from the will of God. Therefore, it will be the one who loves the sacraments, the Eucharist, the most. Not like there are some bad interpretations. I don't know if there are any here, but over there in the Spanish speaking world, there are. Bad examples happen, like how it is implemented, and some say that in the divine will, one should no longer receive communion. And that is a misinterpretation. It is the soul that loves the Eucharist the most because it will love it on behalf of everyone, and it will accept and welcome this gift, not merely as a healing remedy, as medicine for its ills, but to make the life of the divine will grow within it. To receive Jesus and offer him a divine act on behalf of everyone, to give him that pleasure that other souls do not give him. In short, and so we could look at each sacrament one by one. So we return to the same point, how the divine will unites everything that God has done in the soul that wants to live in his will. So now we come back to where she needs it. And those would be the rounds, that is, responding to God for everything we know is in his will. So sometimes we will do one thing, sometimes another, and sometimes perhaps we will encompass everything. In short, whatever God inspires us to do. Depending on the situation, we want to be able to receive inspiration. Yes, even in the things of daily life. Whatever God puts before us will be an opportunity to make these kind of acts. Well, actually, let me think about that for a moment. Just a second. Even our own personal suffering or the deep pain felt by others. So every single thing we encounter will provide a wonderful opportunity for us to perform meaningful acts
within the presence of the eternal divine. Yes, absolutely, I certainly will, without a doubt. Well, I suppose that more or less it is just about that time now. And oh, what a terrible pity it is. So after completing this long and tiring 2-day journey, let's all hope to always grow more and more in the divine will. We have been absolutely delighted to be here during our stay over these past 2 days. I would like to share with you something interesting that we have actually lived in a way since the very beginning of time. Because in actual reality, from that moment ever since, from the moment we were born, and ever since we were little children, our parents have already been educating us, and they taught us everything they knew. So to put it more precisely, this life is consequently a life. Now that for us is something that feels somewhat natural, right? But the truth is that we have learned it all, little by little, ever since we were really young children. And for this incredible gift, we thank God infinitely every single day. And we want every single person to be able to flourish and reside within the sacred and eternal divine will.
It doesn't matter at what age God lets you know about it. Just the fact that God lets you know about it is an immense grace, which can come to fill your entire life, even your past one. Don't worry. This is because you only have one single will, one memory, one intelligence. Even if you use them for something else before, it doesn't matter. Now, by uniting with the will of God, in His one will, you will receive all those blessings, and it will fill your whole life, even your past, and you will be completely remade in the divine will. So, what's important here is really from this point forward, to move forward,